reduce uncertainty in security, right? And what does uncertainty mean? That's the first question that you want to ask. But I'll give you a little bit of a background about myself, what I do. Also wanted to give a big thanks to Tom, to the rest of the OWASP team. I think the work that they're doing is amazing. Like, I'm a big fan of OWASP, the tools that they develop, and it's a nonprofit. Everybody's doing it in a spare time besides their full-time job, so it's really hard to create such an amazing organization. Let's just give a round of applause. So basically, when people ask me what I do, I tell them I alternate between building things and breaking things. I'm a security guy. I worked at Microsoft, worked at Oracle, worked at Goldman Sachs, was a chief security officer at Guild Group. And right now I'm a CEO of a company called SecurityScorecard. We're in the city. We're about 110 people headquartered here in the city, over 300 enterprise customers like Pepsi-Cola, McDonald's, Goldman Sachs, many others, funded by Sequoia Capital and by Google. And what we do is we basically gather a lot of data on every single company in the world, including every company that you guys work for, and we rate those companies on a scale of 0 to 100 about how effective your security practices are. And all of it is done through OSINT, open source intelligence, so we don't need to ask anybody for permission or consent. So the goal is that we're trying to solve is how do you deduce what's happening inside the company from the outside. And before that was in academia. I did my PhD in cryptography at Yale. So the first question that somebody might ask is, if you look at the headlines, everybody talks about cybersecurity. More people care about cybersecurity than ever. Only in 2016 alone, there were over 300 security startups that were funded. I mean, when I go to the floor of RSA, I literally get an anxiety attack from all the solutions and the vendors on the floor. And also everybody says the security market is growing. Billions of dollars are being invested into security. There's more data than ever. Everybody has the best, latest threat intelligence feed that claims to solve all of your problems. At the same time, the data breaches happen more and more frequently. There's more and more breaches. So why is there so much uncertainty? We're spending more money. We're talking more about the topic. There are more vendors that are claiming to have a panacea for this solution, but at the same, we're not winning, we're losing. So what I want to talk about in this talk is some of the reasons. What are some of the reasons for uncertainty that we have? And what are some tips that you could take away in managing the organization, running the security as a CISO, as a director of security, or as a practitioner that would hopefully provoke people to think something different. So like my hope is that at the end of a talk, there's going to be at least one thing that's going to resonate in somebody's mind, and you might walk away and think something different or do something different when it comes to managing security. So I'm going to try to keep it not too technical. So if you think about the change in mentality between the business guys and the security guys, the business guys want to make more money, and the biggest security risk to any company in the world is not getting SQL injection attack or an APT. It's running out of money. The biggest security risk, if you run out of money, you're done as a company. So the business folks who run the business, including me as a CEO of a company, we care about revenue and we care about business projects. So there was a natural shift towards the cloud about 10 years ago, and everybody was excited. More and more people got put to the cloud, and there's no reason why you want to create your own application for tracking sales leads if you are a consultancy company. You're just going to use Salesforce. There's no reason why, if you're a retail e-commerce shop, of why you're going to create your own storage solution to store files. You're just going to use Box or Dropbox or some other solution. So it's a natural decision, which makes sense. The problem is, after you move to the cloud, the CISO is distraught. Like, what do you do with all the complexity? So if you think about what happened just in the past 10 years, we started with a fortress. So fortress is your data center, your company. Usually all the crown jewels used to be stored within your company. It wasn't somewhere else outside. And you would erect a moat after a moat. So you would do a defense in depth approach where you put one layer of security after another and hope that nobody gets in. So now people travel. They bring their own devices to work. They log in from their home computers. Now you have your home environment that's now exposed to additional threats. I mean, maybe you have Citrix and virtualization, but still, if your home computer is compromised and you're downloading work documents on it, if you're logging into various places, now your home computer or your hotel room or the business center where you log in is in scope. And the sensitive data could travel there. And the further complexity that creates even more complexity is that we're part of an ecosystem. So we're part of an ecosystem, and a typical e-commerce retailer uses dozens and dozens of suppliers, partners, when you just place a purchase on a website. If you buy a shirt like this on a website and you put in your credit card and your name, information is going to travel to over a dozen companies. It's going to travel to UPS or FedEx for shipping. It's going to travel to a credit card processing company. It's going to travel maybe to Omniture or some other company for analytics of your behavior as a user. There's going to be more and more and more places that it travels. I mean, you entered it in just one website, but all of a sudden it's in 20 different places. And so now we're all part of an ecosystem, and we're no longer reliant on only our own security. So before, this used to be your company, and you worried only about your own security. You would get an IDS, a firewall, you would train your people on security awareness. But the important part is it's not just you. Now it's your facilities, it's your human resources. For sourcing, you might be using SAP Ariba. Now all of a sudden you're relying on SAP not getting hacked. For legal, you might be using DocuSign to sign your contracts. Now you're relying on DocuSign not getting hacked and your contracts not getting out. So now you're part of this very complicated ecosystem where all these companies interrelate with each other. And guess what? Those companies use others, because SAP Ariba might use 20 other companies that they share the data. They might be hosting in Rackspace or Heroku or something else. And those companies have more and more and more. So it's a graph. And the compromise of any of one of those links leads to demise of a company. So who here in the room, just by a raise of hands, heard of the Fazio data breach? How many people heard of the Fazio data breach? So like one person, any others? Fazio, F-A-Z-I-O? Anybody heard of that? So Fazio is a small air conditioning contractor, HVAC contractor, that was Sorry? Yep, Target. Everybody knows it as a Target breach. Nobody says Fazio breach. It was Target breach. But it was really the Fazio. They were the contractor. They had connection to Target because Target paid them money. I mean, but guess who suffered?
But Target was accountable, even though HVAC wasn't responsible.
Yeah, you're part of an ecosystem. I mean, if this building, I don't know, if I trip because there's a hole in this floor and the architect didn't plan it properly, we can argue about who's accountable. But we're all part of an ecosystem. If my taxi driver gets in an accident, then okay, I guess it's him. Or maybe it's a manufacturer of a car because the wheel broke in the middle of a ride. But the point is, it's not about accountability. I'm not trying to point a finger, but the point is we're part of an ecosystem, but the bigger guy takes a bigger reputation hit because everybody knows Target. And they suffered millions and millions of dollars as a result in reputational damage. So that's the thing on the right. So the major third-party breaches are becoming the norm, and this increases in complexity, this increases in uncertainty. It becomes very complicated. So in this talk, over the next 25, 30 minutes or so, I will give you 5 concrete tips about what you can do to reduce uncertainty in your organization. And these are going to be high-level tips. So tip number 1, there was a really good talk by Rob Joyce. So if you want to Google for that talk, it's called Disrupting Nation-State Hackers. And Rob Joyce is head of NSA, NSA's Tailored Access Operations. And basically in that talk, he gave a talk. If you want to make my job harder, if you want to make a nation-state hacker's job harder for us to break into your organization, here are the things that you need to do to make a job really hard if we want to hack your company or hack your house. And it's a great talk, but one of the key takeaways is this sentence right there, that spies have little trouble getting into your network because they know better what's on your network than you do. That sentence should sink in. The spies and the nation-state hackers know better what's on your network than you do. You could be a multi-billion-dollar company and you think you know what's going on, but do you really know how things are seen from the outside? Because if you're a hacker or you're a security pen tester, you're not going to care about, security architecture diagram and, are you doing ITIL version 2 and, how your playbook looks. The bad guys are going to look from the outside and see what the low-hanging fruit are. Like, what's noticeable? Let me try a couple of things that I know in my toolbox. If you look at the hacker chatter, if you go look at the hacker chatter, they talk about OWASP a lot and the OWASP tools. Like, you go look at any hacker forum, they're going to say, let's use Deerpaster for path traversal, which is an OWASP project, or like, let's use Burp Suite or something like that to look at the AppSec logs. So they use the same techniques. And so the tip number one is really know how your organization looks from the outside. Do an outside check. Run something like Qualys SSL labs. Look at Shodan. Look at various externally accessible information to really understand how things look from the outside versus what you think they are. Because 99% of the time they're different. We had a customer, still a customer, a hedge fund who's using a service, and we noticed a FTP server in Japan, and they reached out to us and said, like, that's not a server. We said, we double checked, and it was their server that they forgot about. They didn't deprovision it, and it was out there with the default password. And so, make sure you know what's in your network. So, for example, SKG consultancy taxation services. It's tax season, so everybody's rushing to finish their taxes, and you might consider using SKG consultancy taxation services. How do you know they're secure or not? Any ideas, any suggestions? Yeah, they use HTTPS. I'm not available, I'm sleeping or on vacation. What else do you do? It's using HTTPS, I'm on vacation. What else do you do to figure out if this is secure? You can't run a vulnerability scanner. It's not your company, so you don't have a permission to scan their ports or do path traversal or something like that. Like, what do you do?
Look at the score on the site.
Look at what?
The score, the reputational site.
How do you do it? Google it. Good. Excellent idea. So whenever you don't know something, you Google it. So has anybody heard of Havij? So Havij is a SQL injection tool. It's basically like a graphical SQL injection tool for lazy hackers because they don't like SQL map. SQL map requires you to use command line. So in Havij, you have to basically just like click boxes, and then it intrusively tries to break into a company. And then the best part is, if a company is vulnerable, then it's just gonna create an HTML file in the company's folder, and it's gonna say, here's a Havij report. You wanna find those Havij reports, all you gotta do is you use Google. So you go to Google and you say, show me all the pages with Havij report on the title. And SKG consultancy comes up at the top. I didn't try it, I just use Google. It's indexed, it's out there. So you go click on that link, again, publicly accessible page, you're not doing anything inappropriate, it's all indexed, and you got a dump of passwords, emails of people who were using the tax services. All the data is out there, all the data is indexed, but it's right under the nose. So tip one, really know what's in your environment. So tip two, don't chase the security trends. So what does it mean? So I was visiting a friend of mine at NIST like 6 months ago, and he's a famous security guy who develops NIST security standards. So I come to his house, and we get in a car to drive to work because I was given a talk there on security, and he parks the car and leaves his bag in a car with a laptop and doesn't lock the doors. And I say to him, Renee, what are you doing? Are you crazy? You didn't lock your car. You leave in your laptop back in a bag. He says, I don't want somebody to break my, if I lock the doors, if somebody breaks my car, they're gonna break my windows. I don't want them to break my window. Now, I live in New York, so first of all, I would not leave my bag. Second of all, I put like the wheel lock when I get out of the car on the wheel. So because I'm paranoid and people look at me like I'm crazy. But the point is, he was completely rational. People don't break into cars in that neighborhood. And so what am I trying to say? If you think about security, it's not just a threat. It's also the location, the vulnerability and the cost. So just because all of a sudden an e-commerce company next door got breached with a advanced persistent threat, malware on your system, doesn't mean that you need to change your security roadmap and go fight advanced persistent threat, get carbon black or something like that. Like, no, you might be a hedge fund. You might have to be focused on data leakage prevention. That stuff might not matter to you at all. So don't chase trends. Do what's right for your company. And so the corollary of that is that the security solutions that work for a large bank might not work for a small startup, and vice versa. You got to do what's right for your company. You got to tailor what you do for the environment that you're in and the company that you're in. So don't follow trends is tip number 2. Do what's right for your environment and assess what your biggest risk, what the biggest value is, what could happen if that gets breached. So tip number 3, be proactive instead of reactive. So what does proactive instead of reactive mean? So there's an interesting dichotomy. If you look at the security budgets, 80% of our budgets are going towards reactive solutions. Antiviruses, firewalls, various type of solutions where you're waiting to be attacked. When you attack, the solutions are gonna sound alarm, and then hopefully you do something about it. But you look at an efficacy of many of those technologies, and they detect only under 5% of the threats. Like, that's the detection ratio. So you're spending 80% of your money towards things that detect less than 5% of the threats. And only 20% of a budget allocation in many companies is going towards the Security 2.0 toolset. And the Security 2.0 toolset means that you share information like FSISec or NHISec. You look at real-time threat intelligence. Before waiting to be attacked, you try to find out, what are people talking about your company? Are you being targeted? How do you stay ahead of a game? How do you find out if you are the target? Proactive solutions like security ratings, proactive solutions like new type of machine learning activities that look at an unpredictable environment and try to make sense of it. The other interesting thing is we don't need more data. We need less data. Like, that's a contrarian statement. Like, we don't need more security data. We need a lot less of it. What you need is insights. You need analytic insights. You don't need a threat intelligence feed that's gonna tell you, I don't know, you have FTP port open, SQL port open, who cares? Like, if you tell me that you have an FTP port open on Saturday every day at 2 o'clock every Saturday, and then it closes at 4 o'clock, that's interesting. Maybe it's maintenance. Maybe somebody's exfiltrating the data on Saturday and I'm not paying attention, but you just delivered an interesting analytic insight for me. You don't need a threat intelligence feed that's gonna tell you, oh, here's what the bad guys are talking about. Like, you also don't care if they talk about your organization. They talk about OWASP all the time, but they talk in a context of downloading the OWASP tools and trying them for, attacking in that case. But, you care about context. Context is very important. They might talk about your company, but if they say, you know what, I see this URL and it has this vulnerability and I can try this, that's enough context that they're trying to attack a particular URL and you can act with it. And so, again, going back to the point that it's all about, I think that ultimately, I don't think that we really have a security problem. We have a cost problem. And what I mean by that is it's a lot more expensive for a defender to protect than for attacker to attack. You have to protect every single door, but you have to get into only one door. So how do you shift the cost from a defender to an attacker? Suppose you get on the organization and you have honeypots everywhere, you have encrypted data, data is locked up in a special place, there are tons of honeypots, so you don't know which IP address has vulnerabilities, which ones are not. All of a sudden, you're shifting the cost to the attacker versus trying to protect every single point in the environment. And the whole point of having more insights but less data is that you can make quicker business decisions, because ultimately it's all about the business decisions. It's not about security, but it's about what you do for the business. And I think that a lot of people operate in the context of a local maximum versus a global maximum. So like a local maximum is how you're the best at your job. Your director of information security, I've patched everything, I fixed everything, I've done a great job. Like, you've done a great job for your team, but you've not done a great job for the company. It's a difference between local maximum and a global maximum. If you work for Guild, like I used to, like 6, 7 years ago as a CISO. My job wasn't security. My job was to sell pants and trousers and shirts. And if you were in marketing, that was the same job you had. If you're in an investment bank, your job is not to do security or do trading or do other stuff. Your job is the same as every single other person's in the company. How do you make money? How do you protect the business? Everybody has one job, and that job is the mission of the business. And that's the gap that a lot of security practitioners don't understand, and then they complain that it's difficult to deal with the business guys because they're going to say you can't do this, you can't do that, and they're being viewed as a no guy instead of somebody who is trying to find solutions. So robustness instead of resilience. So on the top you have Egyptian pyramids, on the bottom you have a coral reef. So robustness is, Egyptian pyramids are robust. They stood the test of time, they stood through many years, bad weather, good weather. So they're very robust. They're still standing, they did not fall away. At the same time, if you blow up a bomb inside the Egyptian pyramids, they're gonna fall apart. The coral reef is not robust, right? But the coral reef is very resilient. If you chop away part of a coral reef, it's gonna regenerate itself, but it's not as robust as a pyramid. And so it's a very good analogy given by former General Stanley McChrystal in his book, Team of Teams. Very good book about team design and organizations, and it very much applies to security. So how do we focus more on resilience instead of robustness in our organizations? So what does that mean? So what it means is the world is really complex. The world is very complicated, and there are all kinds of things that the attackers could do. And so we are spending all this effort and money and building defense after defense, like onion layer security, to try to get the bad guys away. But like the point is, if somebody's determined enough, they're always gonna get in. Like they're always gonna get in, no matter how much money is spent. So what about instead developing the resilience thinking of just assuming that you're gonna get hacked, assume that things are gonna go wrong, and then the question is, how did you develop your capabilities to deal with the uncertainty, to deal with an issue? And honestly, this is part of the reason why most of the security startups fail, and why most of the CTOs and CIOs don't buy, because not a single vendor's solution is going to solve your problems. Imagine that you're trying to mitigate denial of service attacks. It's not enough to buy Prolexic from Akamai or Cloudflare and you're done. Like, no. Did you develop a capability to deal with a denial of service attack? No, you just spent the money on a vendor tool. Where's the playbook? How's your staff going to react when there's a denial of service attack that happened? Have you trained them? How are you going to escalate? Right? So the same with any tool. It's not about what your team is doing or not doing, but how to develop repeatable capabilities to do the same things. Imagine your team is a machine. You have 100 people in your team. Like, how do you develop repeatable capabilities to do certain things? What do you have and what capabilities are missing? So maybe you develop the so security awareness training, the same thing. It's not enough just to give a presentation. It's not a repeatable capability. That's just giving a talk. How are you going to test the people that they learned what they heard? How are you going to do it iteratively? How are you going to adjust? So the same with security, how do you develop resilience when you're attacked? What if the attacker gets in? What's next? How do you develop those capabilities? Now, tip 5, and that's the last tip before I jump into some fun statistics, is how do you look outward to look inward using OSINT to detect a breach? And using open source intelligence in general is tricky. And the reason it's tricky is because there's a lot of false positives, there's a lot of noise, there are many different sites, so you have to correlate information from all these different sites. Getting information at scale is difficult. Type in a Google dork and Google is easy. That's going to give you a couple of things, but try doing it 1,000,000 times. Google is going to block you. You start rotating proxies, they block you yet again. So like, how do you develop data collection at scale? And so as I used in an example, when we looked at that taxation site, a lot of the time the data is hiding in just like plain sight. So like for example, this is a beautiful castle called Castello de Amorosa, and you're looking at it from the outside. So does anybody want to guess when this castle was built? Like, let's take some guesses from the audience. 461. Like, all you have is a picture. 1005. 1975. Okay, what else? All right. So now let me show you one more piece of data. This, like, it's a beautiful castle. And so this is a picture of that castle under construction. And I was bummed out, by the way, because like, it's a vineyard in Napa Valley. So I went there with my wife and I paid a pretty hefty entrance fee. And then I walk in and I'm like, wow, it's a beautiful 18th century castle. And I walk in and pictures of castle under construction are hanging. So I was a bit bummed out, bummed about the situation. But the data point was there. If you could just x-ray through that, then you could find out. So here's another example. It's a website with Erin Andrews. Erin Andrews was a sports reporter, and she was videotaped through a peephole, and so and the video was posted. And a lot of people started looking for the video. They couldn't find it anywhere. And one day you get a website called video.report-cnn.com, Erin Andrews peephole video. And so the question is, just like a castle, you're looking at it, you search it on Google, and one of the top results, right along CNN.com, like /politics, video.reportcnn.com. So what do you guys think? What are some, it's not a trick question.
It's not a video because it's 0, 0. It's not just a picture.
Okay, what else? What are some other thoughts?
It's a malicious site
How do you know?
with the naming convention.
Okay.
You would not have report -CNN, and it's somebody's trying to make use of a reputed domain.
So very good.
It's like a phishing. It's like a phishing site.
So very good. So first of all, it's not CNN.com, it's video.reportcnn.com. The interesting part is it actually embedded all the stuff from CNN. So if you look at a source code of the HTML page, it would just do a lot of embeds from CNN. It was a real video. It was not a image. And so when you click on the video, what it would do is it would basically say, you know, click here to confirm you over 18 years of age, because it's like a bit inappropriate. You click yes, you click no, and then if you click yes, it plays. And the video was very smart. I've done a bunch of research on this back in 2005, 2003, 2005, I don't remember when. But basically it would check what IP address you're coming from. And if you're coming from a big organization, Microsoft, McAfee, Intel, others, or law enforcement agencies, it would just play the video. Nothing would happen. So you watch the video. And if not, and if you go too often to the site, like if they see that you're going there too frequently, which might mean you're analyzing, also would just play the video, nothing would happen. If you go there, though, for the first time, it would check if you're on Windows or Mac, and it would basically inject various type of cocktails of malware on your computer. And what's interesting is it was a family of Trojans that posed as a fake Adobe Flash installer, and so it would basically use the trick of downloading extra codecs to play the video, but instead of downloading the codecs, it would download the malware into your computer. And if you did investigation of where's the IP address from where the malware was hosted from, and you just look what other websites host this type of stuff. The same guy who basically created it, he hosted it in Taiwan, the server which was serving the malware. He created thousands of websites about job, about online gambling, how to get a better job, latest political events, and he would inject them all over Google results, Bing results, all types of results. So you would go and it would appear in top results. And if you look at Alexa traffic of how many people went there, millions of people whose computers would get infected. So signals are there. But so example number 2. So one day I was looking at this vacation. I was going to Beijing for work back when I was at Goldman. And there was this website that I just stumbled upon called Travel China Vista. And it would talk about various type of cultural activities and, you know, kind of like fun stuff. Like, let's see, where's my culture list? China Vista. So basically you go to that, you go to that site and it says arts and crafts, what do you do in China, what do you do, various stuff. So how do we know if the site is real or not real? How do we know if it's safe or not safe? Like, what would you do? So what do people think? Again, you're not going to be able to use any intrusive vulnerability tools. I tried Havij, nothing popped up. What are some other ideas?
Check the age of the site and check the DNS records.
Yeah, looked okay. Check the age, looked at the DNS, looked okay. What else? What are some other ideas?
So
Googled it, okay. There were some interesting things that I discovered, but not on the first result page. What else? So I looked at the URL, and basically, I looked at the URL. It says ID equal to 1, so I just typed random stuff, and it basically outputted a stack trace, and it said unknown column, and I thought that's kind of weird. That's not kosher type of programming when you just output stack trace. So I started Googling. I didn't want to go further, so I started Googling, and I discovered a website in like page 2, Gaza Hackers, for hackers located in the Gaza sector in Israel, in Palestine. And they were talking about China Vista. And I'm like, that's weird. So I started flipping through the hacker site, and I noticed that they're playing with the URLs and talking about the URLs. And if you basically put ID equal to 1, union select all, concat login name password, you can like dump all the passwords and all the stuff from the site as well. Yeah, no pictures, please, of that. No pictures of that. So yeah, so that was the screenshot of a site, and I didn't think that Gaza hackers would be traveling to China anytime soon, so it was a little bit weird. But again, there was a signal, right? There were signals, and we're missing those signals every single day because we're bombarded with so much uncertainty and so much information every single day, right? So I'm scrolling in the wrong direction. Okay, so which website is more secure, Donald J. Trump or HillaryClinton.com? How would you find out? I don't know. How do you know? That's what I checked for. I don't know if I mentioned that somewhere. Yeah. So I was curious, just, and I typed dig. Dig is the command to check DNS records, space txt, space, thing. And one of them was hosted on Cloudflare, which means it was prevented from denial of service attack. And yeah, as you mentioned correctly, Trump's one was behind Cloudflare. And it's like, I don't know, 10-minute, 15-minute config change. So, I mean, there's all kinds of interesting data that we can dig up in retrospect. So all the signals are really there. You just need to know where to look. Like, you need to know where to look. So I'll mention briefly what SecurityScorecard does, and then I'll open it for questions. I want to share with you interesting data statistic that we compute. But basically, as I mentioned, what we do is we collect data like this. So we go look at every single IP address in the IPv4 space. That's 4 billion IP addresses, every single domain out there, hundreds of thousands of domains. And we look at things that we can collect non-intrusively about companies that are kind of like out there, and then reduce it to a score. And the way that we reduce it to a score is we don't make subjective judgments, but we compare companies to each other. So if you're big financial and you have 1,000 malware infections last month, we're going to compare you to other large financials and say, wait, everybody had 5,000 and you had 1,000, so objectively you're 5 times better. But if you are like a small retailer and you had 1,000 and every other small retailer had 10, then all of a sudden you're much worse. So we're looking for those trends and patterns. I'll answer it in like a minute. Go ahead, actually, Tom.
I was going to ask if you're doing dumps with like census IO.
Yeah.
Where it's like 700 gigs every week.
Yeah, I mean, I know Zakir and David, the University of Michigan guys. We gather it ourselves. We look at census. We gather it ourselves. But yeah, we do. So the question that we basically asked was, can you instantly and non-intrusively measure security of any company in the world, like any company, without them giving you permission or consent? And that's the type of data that we try to gather. And so if you think about an architecture of what we do, basically we have threat market, and threat market is a data collection system. It looks at hacker forums, it scans every single IP address, we reverse engineer malware, extract DGA seeds out of malware, and then sinkhole them and see which computers are infected, communicating to our sinkholes. So all kinds of data, and then terabytes of data every single day. So it's constant amount of data that needs to be piping into the system. And then what we do is we also, and that's actually the really hard part. The really hard part is not gathering the data, but how do you know what IP addresses belong to the company? Like, that's the really hard part. And the reason it's very hard part is because you can get the low-hanging fruit very quickly, like errand records, whois registries, enumerate subdomains, all that other stuff. But how do you know if somebody just took an instance and put it on EC2 Amazon without telling anybody? It's not an errand, it's not an AppNic, It's not a subdomain. How are you going to find out that instance? How are you going to figure out what are the data centers, subsidiaries of companies across the world? And that's a really, really hard problem that we spent millions of dollars, literally, every single year trying to solve. And we can get better, but we're making some good progress. And then we assign a scorecard. And so the way that it looks is we give you a score. So if United Airlines a year ago, you would not be great. And then we tie those type of things to data breaches. And we say, we basically have a team of data scientists, and they go back historically 3 years ago and say, the companies that had a bad grade versus a good grade, how did we differentiate from a statistical perspective, and give you the actionable intelligence of what you can do to reduce uncertainty. And so we compute all kinds of fun statistics. So I wanted to close with 2 pieces of statistic and then open the floor for questions. So when you aggregate all the industries and say which industries have the most things exposed, government was at the bottom, education was at the bottom, and financial services, technology was, retail were some of the top industries. It wasn't entirely surprising because education is a vertical that's based on sharing, openness, and government just has a huge attack surface. But there were some very interesting findings that we discovered. And the final part is we also asked an interesting question. What are the signals that tell us that can help us predict when a breach is going to happen? And so the graph you see in here is a graph of malware, like how much malware we saw emanating out of a company. And we got malware through our own sinkholes, through partnerships with various companies like Team Comrie and others. So you get all these dumps of malware and say, let me go back historically 3 years ago, and the companies who were the worst versus the best, which ones of them announced the breach, which ones of them did not. And what we saw is that the companies who were the worst, there were some companies who were breached that had no malware, right? And there were some companies who never were breached who had a lot of malware. But nonetheless, statistically, there was a significant difference of 3.5 to 4x, where if you had a lot of malware, this graph right here, of mistakes, then the company is more likely to be breached. And if you had no malware, then you're less likely to be breached, 4x less likely. And the reason it makes sense, why does it make sense? Why can you claim that if there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that are misconfigured, why can you claim that you can try to predict this type of events? So first of all, if anybody is determined enough, anybody can get hacked. You could have very little low-hanging fruit and you still get breached. But the thing is, if there's a lot of misconfigurations, if you're doing a lot of things that are sloppy, you're not applying the patches, you have lots of malware pinging outside of your company, there's going to be a lot of low-hanging fruit that other people are going to find out. If we find it, there's going to be other people who find it. And so that means that the company is, there's some interesting statistical inferences that we can make. And with that, we're going to open up for questions.
On the prior graph that you showed,
Yep.
there's an intersection where the best and worst kind of like even out. Can you explain that?
Well, it's a statistical graph, right? I mean, basically what this shows to you is, if you look at if you look at a score from 0 to 100, right? So 100 is the best security, 0 is the worst security. Basically, what this graph shows to you is that if you look at a score of 82, for example, 82% versus 78%, there's no huge significant statistical difference, right? But if you look at a score that's really bad, the score that's 60 or 70, and you compare it to a company that's 90%, for example, there's a significant statistical difference if you go back and look at the breaches. Just because there's so much stuff that's off, there's so much stuff that's misconfigured, that there's a difference. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So do you sell your services to cybersecurity underwriters?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, so like if you look at kind of who pays us money, we have companies who pay us money to monitor their vendors, their partners, like NASDAQ, McGraw-Hill, BNY Mellon, others.
No, it's specifically cybersecurity insurance vendors.
Yeah, so AIG, for example, AIG, Liberty Mutual pays us money, they're customers.
So
Semantic.
if a firm was attempting to buy cybersecurity insurance, they might find that conforming to getting a good score would help them on getting a good price.
Depends on what the insurance underwriter, kind of what policies they have internally, but yeah. The answer is yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so companies like Symantec, for example, are also building cyber insurance products. They're licensing our data, a big chunk of our data, and building insurance models on top of it.
So related to that, do you sell the data to individuals or organizations that want to look at your client health to then short the stock?
I'm sorry, say again, to do what? To trade on it. So we had, we had hedge funds ask the question of trading on the stock and so on. But, right now we don't see a correlation yet between the price of a stock and the breach. I mean, if you just look at the breaches that happened, it was a short-term volatility event to the stock price. Like it was a short-term volatility, but for Target, for all the other breaches, the stock is actually trading higher than it was before the breach. So, it drops a little bit, there's some volatility. Maybe there's a way to kind of like make money on that, but no, the answer is no, not right now. Some people are interested in building models. We don't have expertise to do it in-house. We're a security company. But yeah, I'm not aware of anybody doing it yet.
In the process of investigating and providing a scorecard for a company, did it ever happen to you that you got infected?
I'm sorry, say again, we got infected?
Yeah, well, in the process of investigating whether a company is the IP address and to what extent.
I mean,
has
no,
malware.
not as far as I know. I mean, the things I know, the things I don't know, but as far as I know, no.
So maybe who wants to
Like, no, not aware of anything. We're careful.
One more. You got time for one more question. Go.
Maybe it'll help with my.
come on.
So,
Want to come over?
I have to give this up.
I think I might have actually met you while you were at Guild. Sit down. So, just a quick question, because it seems like part of what your part of your analysis is based on malware sinkholes, and we've adopted a model this year where we're actually running the malware, and we're really trying to run it on the actual endpoints in jails. So, if you do happen to sinkhole malware, you will see connectivity coming from my organization, but we want that to happen. So, in our particular configuration, that's a good thing. What isn't good is if the malware breaks out of the jail. That's a separate problem, something we're working on with McAfee and other vendors. But we actually do launch malware regularly, and we do that from our organization. So that would, in our case, probably influence your score negatively when, in fact, it's not an issue.
Yeah, so that's an awesome question. So this is a great question. So first of all, we base a score on like hundreds of different points. Ports, hacker chatter, leaked credentials, SPF misconfigurations, malware, etc. Social engineering, like how likely is a company to fall for social engineering. You can measure it from outside, non-intrusively. So what you asked is an awesome question, and you can actually extend that question to many different categories, not just malware, but just in general. That's why computing a security score is really hard. There's so many caveats. Like if you asked me 3 years ago, I would tell you we would be like done with the algorithm by now, but we're constantly tweaking it, optimizing it. So for example, kind of like to paraphrase it is, what if I have a honeypot that has all kinds of open ports, then you're going to penalize that IP address. Or if I have a malware in my wireless network and you just penalize my wireless network, but maybe, or if I have a DMZ and it's not virtualized and it's infected, two different things. So that's actually some of the challenges of figuring out how to do a score very well. And so you have to take into account the profile of the organization. You have to, like, basically, if you're a security organization, then this type of stuff is going to happen. If you look at Symantec McAfee, you're going to have a lot of signals beaconing out of the labs. So you have to just take it into account into your model. And we do in some cases. And in some cases, we don't. And then that would be an outlier, right? So great question, not an easy problem, but those are some of the constraints. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Alex Yampolskiy.